timeline to application. Over the course of today's workshop, we're going to be talking about the following goals. And those are to learn what you can expect from now until when you will matriculate to your medical school program of choice. We'll also review the committee letter deadlines and requirements. We'll provide you with some information to update your calendar with and monthly expectations. So if you have a calendar handy, I do suggest bringing that out now so that you can document the timeline as we go over it. And our final goal of today's workshop is to allow you to plan ahead for busy times and application expenses. And the busy times will, for example, correspond with busy times outside of the application cycle, which can include times like finals, co-op, and so on. So starting with today, it's October, this month, things that you should be thinking of with regard to goals in your timeline planning is your preliminary planning stages. So the first thing that you can think to do is go to your medical applicant portal and download the self-assessment. The self-assessment is a great tool to assess where you are in terms of preparedness for medical school. Another step in the preliminary planning phase is to begin to develop your study strategy for entrance exams if you haven't taken them yet. For the MCAT, for example, we suggest about 4 to 6 months of individual study time, which may be done in conjunction with a test prep course, though this is not necessarily required. But the big takeaway here is to know that your prerequisite courses and a test prep class wouldn't be enough. Individual study time is required and strongly recommended for the 4 to 6 months prior to taking your exam. For our MCAT folks, the 2019 registration for the MCAT for test dates between January and June of 2019 are opening on October 25th. There is a pre-registration process to the MCAT, and you can do that starting before the 25th to expedite the process of registering on that date. The registration is manually done. So what that means is someone has to come in to the office and open up MCAT registration for the entire country. So it's likely not going to happen at midnight on the 25th, but what's more common is that it's going to happen about the beginning of the workday. AAMC does have a great resource. Their Twitter is where they announce most of these times and upcoming notifications. October is also a good month to plan for missing activities and or experiences. So again, using that self-assessment, you can see the areas that we've indicated are those you should have considered on your path to your program of choice. Clinical experiences, community service, the like. In reviewing that self-assessment and MAT, in your general experiences as you've spoken about them to advisors, mentors, you can plan to fill in any gaps between now and when you apply in June. You'll also want to use this month to consider who you will ask for letters of evaluation, which we'll go into greater detail on a bit later. This is also a good month to think about reviewing your finances. As you will see through the process, there will be points and times where you will be required to pay application, test or exam fees, and other expenditures that will have to be accounted for. Review your calendar. Note busy times in your calendar that you know of already Again, those could be finals. It could be regarding when you're taking the MCAT exam and so on. And another thing that we have going on this month, it's actually happening tomorrow, is a webinar with Case Western Reserve University admissions. It's tomorrow at this same time, noon, and the link is provided below. But again, we'll email this out to you. And it's also up on our social media account. So now we move into November. Next month, you'll begin to self-reflect on different aspects of your application, or preparing to apply rather. November is when we suggest you start to fill out your medical applicant portal, begin to brainstorm your personal statement, and this is something that's nice to do with family and friends, maybe while you're home for the Thanksgiving break, to really talk about your intentions for pursuing this particular career, brainstorm how you've gotten here, and possible topics for your personal statement. It's also suggested that you create an organization system for researching schools. Part of applying to your programs is going to be identifying schools whose curriculums, whose initiatives, whose mission and vision align with yours. We find students are most successful when they're able to do this. Creating an organization system for inputting data and information from schools that you've heard about or researched is an important way to stay organized on this path. Again, consider who you will ask for letters. And this is especially important for our January co-op students because they won't be on campus next semester. So for our January co-op students, you can begin to have preliminary conversations, especially with faculty on campus, before the conclusion of the semester. For our letters of recommendation that are required for the committee letter, you will need 3 faculty letters from faculty who've taught you in a 4-credit course at Northeastern or from Northeastern. 2 of those faculty letters need to be science letters, so from biology, chemistry, mathematics, or physics professors. The 3rd is your choice. We recommend a non-science letter or someone from your major if you're not a science major. The 4th required letter and last required letter is a clinical letter. This will be from a practitioner in the field to which you aspire. So if you're applying to MD programs, you will be required to have an MD letter for your committee letter, a DO for DO schools, dentist for schools of dentistry, and so on. This must reflect experience within the U.S. and within the last 18 months. We do have 2 slots for optional external letters of recommendation. We often see that those come from co-op supervisors, volunteer supervisors, and what we strongly suggest is that if you do have one of these be, or at least one of these be a research letter from a PI, for example. Next month, we do have another director visit. This one is going to be from Tufts Medical School, and it is Dean David Newmeyer, who will be coming to talk to our students on campus at the date and time listed. So moving kind of forward from that piece about creating an organizational system to research schools, we provided some resources here to help you begin those searches. The first for MD programs is the MSAR. So it stands for Medical School Admissions Requirements, and it is a one-stop shop where you can learn more about the U.S. medical schools. A subscription for a year to MSAR is about $27. So now that you're in your year of application, it should last you from now until when you would be applying. And the link is provided here. For dental programs, they do have the official guide, which will provide an overview of the requirements and an overview of the schools of dentistry. This can be purchased online or in hard copy, and it is a comparable price to the MSAR. DO programs also have information on the AACOM website that can provide additional information about schools of osteopathic medicine. December. December is the month where we translate our brainstorming and planning into development of the materials you'll need for your application. December is a good month to work on your self-assessment, especially if you have a January MCAT or DAT scheduled, because that is the month that the self-assessment will be due. It's also a great month to continue to work on your medical applicant portal and filling out the sections contained therein. And this is especially important if you have an April MCAT or DAT scheduled, because that is when MAP will be due for the committee letter requirements. You want to continue studying for your entrance exam in December, and outline or write first drafts of your personal statement. First drafts and outlines are really good to run by people like your friends, your family, your mentors, but also the Writing Center here on campus is a great resource to help you work through your preliminary drafts of your personal statement. January. We've reached our first deadline for the committee letter. January 31st, for the committee letter, you'll have to have completed your applicant agreement, and that's a Google Doc, and it's accessible via your medical applicant portal. And you'll also have to have completed your self-assessment and uploaded that to MAP. So if you've used the previous months leading up to January to put together a thorough and thoughtful self-assessment, it will be a really good resource for you moving forward as you move towards application. Self-assessment is not shared with medical schools. It's only seen by you and the pre-health advising program. But the more thorough you are on it, the more useful the feedback and the more useful it will be towards the application. Your goal for January is to continue to develop materials. So now, if you haven't already done so, you want to have preliminary conversations with your letter writers. After your first week of classes is probably the best time to do this, as faculty are very busy during the first week of classes. Once you've had these conversations with faculty or your clinical letter writers or your optional letter writers, you'll then want to request your letters through the medical applicant portal. When you request letters through the medical applicant portal, it will generate an email to the letter writers with instructions for submission, including the due date and what should be included in the letters. That's why it's extremely important to confirm your letter writers first before requesting the letters through MAP. January is also a time where you can sit for the MCAT if you're ready to take it. So, if you're doing well in your practice exams and the data is showing you that you're about ready to take this test, then you can sit for the MCAT. Otherwise, you want to continue studying. And with regard to ongoing research for schools, you'll want to continue to develop your reasons for why you want to go to a particular program and start to look at the individual schools' websites beyond just the MSAR, for example. So doing a little bit of deeper research. February. February is a goal-oriented month with reflection and continued development of your materials. It's February that you may receive your feedback from your self-assessment from a member of the pre-health advising team. Based on feedback and based on any weaknesses that you identify in your self-assessment, you want to begin to address any deficiencies. The pre-health advising program is here to meet and discuss any questions or concerns you may have. Just book an appointment with a pre-health advisor via your My Northeastern. In February, you'll want to continue to study for entrance exams, researching your schools, developing your personal statement. And this is something that you'll continue to do through June. So to address the question that our student has asked, I'm going to move on to March. So March 15th is the deadline that all required letters are due to MAP. So you must request these letters in advance of March 15th to give your letter writers enough time to develop their letters and upload them to the system. The required letters that must be received in MAP by March 15th are 3 faculty letters, 2 science, 1 your choice, 1 clinical letter from a practitioner in the field, and we recommend the 2 optional letters. You'll notice that once the letters are uploaded into MAP, the status of the letter will change from sent to awaiting verification. Awaiting verification means the letter has been received, and this is the status that we need to see by March 15th. Please also be advised that many letters do come in to us between March 1st and March 15th, with a large number coming in the days leading up to the deadline. This is normal and expected, and we find that almost all of our evaluators who have agreed to write your letter will have uploaded their letters on time. If it's been some time since you've contacted your letter writers as that deadline approaches, you can simply send a soft reminder email to them regarding the impending deadline. The goal for March now can be to request your committee letter interview, as that's the next step in this phase. The following must be completed before requesting your committee letter interview. So you will have to have met our first 2 deadlines, the first of the applicant agreement and self-assessment on January 31, and taking it a little bit further with regard to the letters, all required letters must have been received in MAP by the deadline, that's the 15th, and have been verified. So verified means that we've received a letter, but also that a member of the pre-health advising program has verified the letter is accurate. So that the correct letter has been uploaded, for example, for the correct student. Once your letter has been marked verified, and all your required letters have been marked as verified, you'll then have to ensure your MAP is fully completed before requesting your committee letter interview. Items that are required for MAP that will be necessary to request your committee letter interview will include, as mentioned before, that all required letters have been verified, that you filled out the fields of citizenship, medicine, that you've uploaded your personal statement, which should be a developed draft of your personal statement, but certainly does not need to be the final version, as we will provide feedback to you, which you may want to incorporate on your application, on your final draft. For MD PhD applicants, there's 2 additional essays, so 3 essays in total. You'll have your personal statement, but similar to the AMCAS application, you'll have 2 additional essays, one which will be an overview of your research experience, and the other why you're pursuing the dual degree path. There are 3 short essays on MAP that must be completed prior to requesting your committee letter interview. You'll have to have input your exam scores or a future exam date if you haven't taken it yet. Complete the interests and experiences sections, filling out the areas in each interest and experience of what you learned and what you contributed to those experiences, and providing a preliminary list of schools you're considering applying to. And this can be a working list. April is our third deadline. So by April 15th, you'll be required to request your committee letter interview if you haven't done it already. You don't have to wait until April 15th to request your committee letter interview. You can do it earlier as long as all of the requirements have been met. To reiterate, the applicant agreement and self-assessment by January 31, required letters by March 15th, and have been verified, a map will have had to be filled out completely. How do you request an interview? Well, this is the time of year I get a lot of emails, as you can imagine. So you will email me to request your committee letter interview once you've met all of the following requirements listed, all of the requirements listed above. After you request, you'll wait for approval, and once received, schedule your committee letter interview via your My Northeastern. Interview slots are clearly titled Committee Letter Interview. Do not book a 30-minute student appointment slot for your committee letter interview. You may schedule your interview with any pre-health advisor. And keep in mind, if you do schedule a committee letter interview prior to receiving approval, that it may be subject to cancellation and you'll have to reschedule once you receive your approval. May 15th is our next deadline, and this is the final day to have your committee letter interview. So between April 15th and May 15th, we do have most of our committee letter interviews with applicants. Committee letter interviews will review your overall intention and motivation for wanting to go to the program that you're applying to. And it's an opportunity for a member of the pre-health advising team to learn more about you in a one-on-one setting, beyond things that you list in your self-assessment and on your medical applicant portal. The person who conducts your committee letter interview will also be the individual who writes your committee letter. So the more that person knows about you, the more they can understand who you are as a candidate, the more content and the more thorough our committee letter can be. The goal for May is to get organized so that you can apply early. This is super important for our students who are applying MD, DO, and dental, as those applications open in May or June. So you'll begin filling out your application in May, going through that thoroughly, proofreading it, checking for typos, showing it to mentors. Part of filling out the application, if you've done it well, can be transcribing information from MAP or from your self-assessment to the application portal itself. None of that information is sent to medical schools, but it is there for you to be used as a resource. May is when you may schedule a final meeting with your pre-health advisor. Take your entrance exam if you haven't done it yet. Make any final revisions to your personal statement, and finalize the schools list and the schools that you'll be applying to. June. So this is our next deadline, and it's one that many of you will have already completed before the deadline, but the last day to take the MCAT and still receive a committee letter is June 30th. So keep this in mind. However, our recommendation is that you do take your MCAT sooner so that you will have your score on hand when you're submitting your application, because it does take 30 days to get your scores back. Nonetheless, never sit for an exam if you're not ready to take it. And if you're finding that your MCAT preparation timeline is not going as you had hoped or according to your plan, please make an appointment with a pre-health advisor to discuss. Your goal for June is to submit your excuse me, is to submit your application. So your goal would be to submit your application within the first week of applications opening. For DO, applications open in May. So for DO schools, the day that the application opens is the first day you can submit it, but we advise that you do take your time to fill that out before submitting rather than rushing through the application. For MD and dental, the applications open for filling out prior to the date they open for submission. They built in about 2 weeks of time where you can work on your application before the first day for submissions. Veterinary is also in June, so MD, dental, and veterinary applications open for submitting in June. Optometry is July, podiatry, August. So a little bit more detail regarding the specific applications. For osteopathic medical schools, as I mentioned, the applications open in May. They can be submitted right away. But again, plan to spend at least a week filling out the application, making sure you take the time to proofread the application before you submit it. Because once that is done, applications cannot be changed. For osteopathic medical school, you'll also have to send your MCAT scores to AACOMAS, which is the application service. There will be instructions within AACOMAS on how to do this. Something else that's a bit different with osteopathic medical schools than with allopathic medical schools is that the secondary applications are often within the AACOMAS application. So you'll want to take your time to fill those out as needed and appropriately. The anticipated cost for osteopathic application is around $195 for your primary application and one school. Additional schools are $45 each. Secondary application fees vary from $50 to $100 typically, which brings the total cost for applying to 10 schools about $1,200. Fee assistance programs do exist for osteopathic medical school applications, and it's encouraged that you apply to those sooner than later as they are not retroactive. For osteopathic medical school in particular, for all students who are eligible to receive fee assistance, all did receive it in the last cycle. So our friends from osteopathic medical schools in AACOMAS have encouraged us to encourage you to see whether you're eligible and should be applying for fee assistance through AACOMAS. The MD application. Allopathic medical school applications open in May, but they cannot be submitted typically until June. So usually about a 2-week window. But plan to spend at least a week filling out the application, being thorough in your transcription from your other sources, be it your transcript, map, self-assessment, and so on. Because, again, once submitted, applications cannot be changed. Once you've submitted your application, hopefully in the beginning of June or the day that the applications open, you can then turn your attention to pre-writing your secondaries, which are not included in the primary application, as is the case with DO schools. The link provided here, perspectivedoctor.com, gives prompts for secondary essays from previous years. You'll notice many schools' secondary essay prompts stay the same annually. Others will change slightly. Use your best discretion to pre-write as much as you feel is necessary and appropriate given the trend of secondary essay prompts for the schools to which you applied year to year. This is extremely important because once we get to July, those secondary applications will start coming into you rather quickly, and you'll want to turn them around quickly, which is much harder to do if you have not done any pre-writing. Anticipated cost. Primary application plus one school is $160. Additional schools are $39 each. Secondary application fees vary, again, between $85 to $200. And the cost for about 15 schools is about $3,000. So the reason you can see cost for 10 schools versus 15 schools, DO versus MD, the typical number of schools that students apply to for DO is about 8 to 10, and MD 10 to 15. So keep that in mind. If you're applying to both, you'll likely be on the lesser end of those scales for both. So, maybe 6 to 8 DO or fewer MD to keep your overall costs manageable. But certainly you can meet with your pre-health advisor to discuss applying to both MD and DO programs and how many schools you'll be applying to for each. The dental application. Dental school applications open in May, and like MD applications, cannot be submitted until June, usually towards the end of the first week. Plan to spend at least a week, again, filling out the application. This is pretty consistent with all the application services because, again, applications cannot be changed once they're submitted. For dental schools, secondary processes vary by school. Some will be included in the primary applications and others won't. So be prepared for either of these scenarios. The anticipated costs for dental school applications is around $250 for the primary application fee plus one school, with additional schools being $99. Secondary applications fee do vary again, $30 to $200, with the cost for 10 schools ranging about $2,000. So now that we've talked about what you'll be doing with regard to submitting application in June, we move to July. July 31st is the last day to take the DAT for our dental school applicants and receive a committee letter. The reason for this, again, is because MCAT does take a month to receive scores. DAT is same day. So this equates to being the same kind of time frame for receiving scores and a committee letter. This is also, and this is important for everyone, the last day to submit your primary application and receive a committee letter. The only exception to this is podiatry school, as applications to podiatry school don't open until August. The goal for July is early submission of your secondary applications. You'll want to submit these within 1 to 2 weeks of receipt, with the exception of programs that include secondary applications within the primary application. So in order to do this, because as I mentioned, they may come fairly close together, is to pre-write in the month of June and beginning of July so that you're able to submit your secondary applications promptly once they are received mid-July or after. August is a nice month because it's your month to relax. It's quiet, so it's a good time to plan some downtime or vacation. However, you want to make sure that wherever you go, you have daily access to the internet because interview invitations do begin in the middle to end of August. They'll trickle in at this time, but they do start. When you receive an interview for a medical school or dental school, schedule those promptly and with enthusiasm. Be careful about scheduling interviews too close together, especially if they're in very different places geographically because you need to account for travel time, including possible delays, and time to recuperate and rejuvenate between interviews. September. The goal for September is to go on your interviews and practice patience. So when interviews begin, and September interview invitations will come more than they had in August, keep in mind that dress is conservative and formal, so suits. You want to plan for travel expenses to and from your interviews for your interview attire, which can remain the same, of course, for your interviews, and possible lodging. To offset the cost of interview expenses, you can look into whether your program offers a student housing option for interviewers, which would mean that you'd stay overnight with a student who attends that program. You want to also plan time for taking off of work or classes here and have conversations with supervisors and professors regarding that. Patience is also extremely important this month. Plan for self-care. I know it might not seem it now, but waiting after you've submitted an application can be the hardest part. Continue to achieve in school or work as usual, as you'll be talking about your achievements and ongoings in your school interviews and thereafter. Milestones for the month of September are our first acceptances to DO schools. Once you've received an acceptance, a deposit is due typically within 2 weeks. For DO programs, it could be up to $1,500 and non-refundable. So it does take a bit of strategy here as to accepting DO acceptances. If you receive multiple around the same time, you'll likely have to consider which school you would like to attend if you did not want to hold multiple acceptances, paying that non-refundable deposit more than once. So that could be a little bit of strategy with regard to DO schools. October. We continue with your interviews and patience, as medical school interviews will continue to come, and you'll be waiting patiently and practicing self-care. Milestones for October include our first acceptances to MD schools. So traffic rules prevent or preclude medical schools of allopathic medical schools from extending any acceptances before October 15th. Once October 15th comes, you'll notice that some schools will send acceptances, but others follow their own traffic rules and will send them later, which is completely normal and anticipated. When you do receive an acceptance, again, your deposit is due typically within 2 weeks. Typically, it's up to $100 and is refundable, which means you can deposit at multiple schools. November, we're continuing with our interviews and patience as invitations continue to come, and we're practicing self-care. December, those same goals are in mind with our next big milestone for our dental students, where acceptances begin on December 1st, as December 1st is the traffic rule for dental programs. Deposits are typically due within 30 days. If your acceptance comes before January 1st, 15 days for offers thereafter. Again, you can deposit at multiple schools, as is the case with schools of allopathic medicine. January through May, are, again, months of interviews and patience. As I mentioned before, it can be the hardest part. So you'll want to use your tips and strategies for wellness, whatever those might be for you, in order to ensure your well-being during this time. The pre-health advising program does offer strategies and resources for wellness to our students. And in fact, next Monday, we will be hosting a wellness kickoff event at 6 p.m. in collaboration with the University Health and Counseling Services and the Center for Spirituality and Dialogue. Things that you'll be doing between next January and May will include rescinding your acceptances for multiple schools. So April 30th is the last day to hold multiple deposits to MD programs. So if you have submitted multiple deposits and accepted your invitation to multiple schools of allopathic medicine, you have to narrow it down to just one by April 30th. Because on May 1st, those schools will go to their wait lists for their newly vacant seats. May 5th is the last day to hold multiple deposits at dental schools, so that on May 6th, they can go to their wait lists as well. And finally, we're at June to July of 2020. The goal here is to get ready to start your program. Make final plans for your move. Determine final details of your finances. And get ready for your medical or dental school orientation in July or August. So as you see Superman crossing the finish line, you too will be crossing that finish line sometime in June, July, when you're getting ready to matriculate at your medical school. Though it be a long process, as you can see from this person in the picture, it's all worth it once you get there. So I'm going to open up the floor now to any questions or comments. And thank you all for attending today's Timeline workshop.